Hello, brothers and sisters. I want to welcome you all back once again to an all-new Sermons in the Park. As always, I am Reverend Jamie McCaskill. I know a couple of weeks ago I did a video talking about myself, introducing myself to you, letting you know things about me that if you didn't know me already, you would not have already known. And then you heard me mention that I had become close with one of you followers of the sermons, Ashley, who I had already known, but I became real close friends with. This past week, I got news that she had passed away. She was a fighter. She was a great friend, great mother. She was a really good person. She was struggling and becoming closer to God through her faith. So I was very saddened to hear about her passing. Take this time to send, if I haven't already told you and you're close with her, friends with her, family with her, whatever, I want to give you my condolences and my love and support and let you know I'm here for you. They had her funeral yesterday, so I want to let y'all know about that before we get into today's message. So I pray that if you're watching today, I want to pray the Lord has brought you here in good health and spirits. If you've been watching alone, you know that we've been delving into the life of Elijah and how each of us can, while reading the story, we can use it to better deepen our relationship with God. Last week we left off after Elijah had brought in the rains, and Jezebel, who was a follower of the prophets of Baal and the grove, she's angry because of the deaths, or I should say the murders, of the prophets of these false gods by the hand of Elijah. So she sends word to Elijah that she will kill him as well. So he flees for his life. So we're going to pick up there, which is where we left off at 1 Kings 19. We're looking at verses 3 to 4. Go turn there. And we'll read, it says, "And when he saw that he arose and went for his life, he came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servants there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die, and said, It is enough. Now, O Lord, take my life, for I am not better than my fathers." Upon reading this, I know you might think, of course, that Elijah was wanting to die. But I want you to remember that Jezebel wanted to kill him. If he had wanted to die, he could have just stayed there. I mean, here we see another example of how Elijah is like so many of us. He is suffering from self-pity. He is suffering from, so much. And I mean, how many of us have felt like that? We like things just are not going our way. And that no matter what we do, we just can't win. I know I have. I mean, here we see Elijah feeling the same way. Elijah's asking God, essentially, take my life, even though he didn't want to die. He was just feeling self-pity. I mean, look at the statement again. "O Lord, take my life, for I am not better than my fathers." So this here tells us a lot. Elijah had done all these great things. He boldly went before the king, and he called down this drought, and it came. When he was with the widow woman and her son died, Elijah, even though there's no other time in the Bible this happened, was able to bring this child back from the dead. He then, again, without anybody ever having done it before, he calls down fire from heaven. All these great things that he had done that had never been done before. He probably thought to himself that he was better than anybody before him. It's so easy for us to get to that point where we think we're better than everybody else. He had all these successes, and they had put him in this dangerous spot. They had caused him to feel, like I said, like he said, I'm better than his fathers. So I repeat this several times, that Elijah told this falsehood, right? Where he believed that he was the last, where he states, I am the last, even though he knew Obadiah had told him that there are several hundreds of prophets that he had hidden away in caves. So why does he say that he's the last? Did he just ignore what he was told? Or did he feel like there were none serving God like he was? Personally, I think that Jezebel just wanted to intimidate Elijah. I mean, she was the queen. If she wanted someone dead, she would just order someone to go do it. But no, she doesn't do that. She just sends a warning to him. She tells him, hey, you killed my prophets, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to make sure you're just like they are. So I want you to notice here earlier that Ahab had tried to intimidate Elijah as well. But it didn't work. But here we have Queen Jezebel, and Elijah, she threatens Elijah, tells Elijah, I'm going to make you like the prophets that you slew. And what happens? He flees. He runs away. Now I want you to think about what changed here. What changed? What was different between King Ahab threatening him and Queen Jezebel threatening him? What changed? And the reason this happens is, as my grandma used to say, Elijah became too big for his britches. He said it himself. He thought he was better than his fathers. The moment that we believe we are better than others, brothers and sisters, we're in trouble. The moment you believe you're better than someone else, your life's in trouble. When we look at the life of Elijah, as the Bible gives it to us, he started off dependent on God. He was very dependent on God. When he went into the wilderness and God brought him God sent his food and his water to him, right? He was dependent on God. He trusted in him. And he relied on God to take care of him. Because as I said, when he was going into the desert, he didn't have any plans for food and water, but God sent it to him, right? God told him, go to the brook Cherith, and there he provided for him. And as we discussed, if he hadn't went there, he probably would have starved to death, probably would have thirsted to death, because God sent it there already. God already sent it there. But as he saw all these successes that he was having, he became more confident in himself, began believing more in himself, moving further and further away from God, more and more towards himself. It's so easy for us to do that. It's so easy for us to be dependent on God when everything's going bad. I say this time and again in my sermons, when things are bleak, so many of us lean on God. We do. We lean on him. And when all of a sudden things start getting better and better for us, we tend to come away from it. When I was, I think I told the story, when I was first saved, when I was 14, my mother called up Brother Junior because I said I wanted to go to church. Brother Junior Tristler, Church of God, would pick me up and bring me to church. And before the first day, he pulled me aside and he talked to me. He made sure that I wasn't coming to God in fear. And at the time, I didn't really understand that. I didn't understand why he would pull me aside and ask me, are you only coming to God because of fear? And as I've become a minister, I've noticed, even more and more through my life, that when you come to God in fear, you're not coming to him in honesty. You're not coming to him with your whole heart. You're only coming to him because right now I'm afraid. And the majority of us won't stay there. We won't continue our life through Christ. You risk going back to how you were, because the moment things become better, many of us tend to turn away. We tend to, okay, everything's good now. We'll go back to the way we were. And the reason is because, God tells us one thing, we can see another. And that moment, that confidence and that dependency slip away. And we become, like I said, we go back to what we were. That's what we see Elijah at here. We see Elijah at this moment where he's no longer depending on God. He's no longer relying on God. He's like, hey, I'm doing these great things. I'm doing these great things. He's becoming more confident in himself, right? He's becoming more confident in himself. And that's how he fails. This can happen to us if we aren't careful. We need to let this, we can't let this happen to us. We need to look at Elijah's story. He was so strong. He was so bold. He defied the king, right? He defies the king. He defies the king's army. He kills the prophets of the false god Baal. 850 of them. 850 false prophets. He kills them. And one woman with a note scares him. One woman with a note scares him. She gives him this note and he flees for his life. Because Elijah's strength came from the Lord and not himself. And he turned away from the Lord. And that's one of the, and it causes him such fear, because now he's got to rely on himself. Right? We need to realize that in God we have we have a great God, we have a great King, we have a great Lord. And if we lean on him and we love him and we show our devotion to him, he's never going to leave us. We can't rely on ourselves. That's it for today's sermon on Elijah. We'll pick up next week. But I want to touch a little bit on. Now I've been pointing out, as I've been seeing more and more signs that we're coming towards the end times. I want to remind you all that, you hear people go, how can a loving God let things like this happen? How can a loving God? Number one, the Lord's not letting this happen. We are letting these things happen. We are letting these things happen, not God. And why when the end times have come, why? Why is a loving, when you read Revelations, people tend to go, it's a contradiction of God, because he's a God of love. And then here we have him laying his wrath on us, right? I read a story recently that touches a little bit on what happens, why these things happen. It's a story, this little girl is out in the field, and a rabid dog comes on her. And she's backing away, and she's screaming, and there's this mountain behind her. So she's backing towards this mountain. There's this rabid dog that's creeping closer and closer and closer. The people in the village hear her screaming, and they're all watching, and they're scared. They're freaking out, because here's this rabid dog going towards this little girl. And one of the men from the village runs out, and he's yelling at the dog, trying to get its attention away from the little girl, so the little girl can get away. And the dog, jumps and leaps at him and growls and snarls. And the man runs away. And everybody's freaking out. And the mother of the daughter is screaming for somebody to help her little girl. Another man runs out. Same thing. He's yelling, screaming, trying to get the dog's attention. The dog turns around, "Arr!" and goes after him, and he runs back, scared. The third man runs out, same thing. He yells and screams, the dog turns at him, and then he runs back. And you look at this, and these are men trying to save a little girl, right? And then finally, another man runs out. Looks like he's got a madness in his eyes, and he dives on the dog. And he starts choking it. And the dog's biting and scratching at him and tearing at his arm. And he holds on for dear life, and he's squeezing the life from this dog until finally the dog dies. And someone looks on and says, "What is wrong with that man? Is he crazy?" And someone says, "You don't understand. That's the little girl's father." So the little girl's father loves her so much that madness come on him, and he killed the dog to save her. In Revelations, that's what we have. We've had so many chances to save ourselves. We've had so many chances that finally God has to step in. So that's why, when the end times happen, when these things start happening, you should realize that it's not because of anger, it's because of love. So I thank you all for tuning in today. I'm sorry. I hope that my sermon has touched you and you've learned a little something new, especially from the life of Elijah. And you realize that we need to put more love and more hope in God. We need to trust more in God and less in ourselves. We need to turn our backs on the ways of this world and turn towards and look towards God for our hope and our future. So thank you all again for joining me here. I love each and every one of you, and I pray that God blesses you and keeps you. And that I'll find you here next week for all new sermons in the park. Thank you again, and I'll see you soon.